Hello everybody, my name is Tuomo from CodePulse, and today's video we will learn how to focus elements such as text inputs in React. Before we get started, if you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button below, and if you enjoy this kind of videos, be sure to like this video also. But without further ado, let's get to the point. So, focusing elements with plain JavaScript is quite easy. You get the element, for example, with ID and call a focus method on it, and that's pretty much it. But how can we focus element in React since we can't get the element by ID, class or type, like you would with plain JavaScript? Well, the answer is React refs. There is a good documentation on React refs in the reactjs docs, and what refs are, or what you can do with refs, is you can use them to access DOM nodes or React components that are rendered in the render method. Refs are created with react.createRef function, and refs can be assigned to an element with ref attribute. And there is few ways we can create these refs. The createRef method call, as I mentioned, but then there is also something called callback refs, which we will cover in just a bit. But first of all, let's look at what we are going to do in this video. So we are gonna do a very simple React application that has 3 text inputs and 3 buttons, and when we press each of the buttons, the corresponding text input is focused. So as we can see, if we click the focus first, it will focus the first text input and we can type it. And we will also see how to do this if we are using a React version 16.3 or higher, and how to do it with React versions lower than 16.3. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna use CodeSandbox.io and create a new Create React App sandbox, like so. And what I'm gonna do is just get rid of this default text here. Just a second. And create a new file. Actually, we will save this and create a new file. And let's just call this React 16.3.js. So what we will do is create a component that has the 3 text inputs, and we will create the refs by using the method that's available after 16.3 version. So it's the preferred method for creating refs. Yep. And actually, let's rename this. Excuse me. Let's call it refs, like so. And inside here we will import React and React. Actually, import React. And then we will create the component. And let's create a render method, and for now just return div with text 16.3 and save it. Then switch back to the index.js, and in here actually we don't need the styles, and in here let's import our component. And inside the div in the app component, let's close it. Sorry, I'm gonna make it a multi-line return statement, and inside this div let's create the header and React greater or equal than 16.3. And below that we will render our component. Okay, and it looks like we forgot to export this component. So export default refs 16.3. Let's save it, and we can see the app is working. There is the header, and this is the text inside our refs component. Okay, next up we need to let's create the HTML for the component. So as we can see, we had 3 text inputs and 3 buttons below them. So let's create a table that has 3 cells and 2 rows. So in render method, return, and we create a div, and inside that let's create a table, and inside that let's create the first row, which will have the columns, and inside the column we'll have the first input, and let's add a placeholder text first input, and we can copy paste this because we have 3 columns, so we just replace the placeholder like so. And then on the other line we have the buttons, so td, inside there we have input type button and value focus first, like so. And we can again copy paste this, change the values, and now we have the same layout as we had in the example. So 3 inputs and 3 buttons. But for now there is nothing happening when we click the buttons. So now we need to add the focus logic. So we will take use of refs. And the way we will do them is, if we look at the refs documentation, we will do it with this way by calling react.createRef. So first of all, let's add a constructor for our component and add the supercall and after that we will have to define the inputs that we are gonna use. So how we do that is by calling this dot and we name the input. So let's call this the first input and it equals react.createRef, like so. So now we have a variable called first input that is ref. And next up, actually we will create a ref for each input, so we will type in text second input react.createRef and this dot third input react.createRef, like so. Now we have three refs defined, and how we can tie this variable first input to the actual first input and the second one to the second input and third one to the third is by adding ref attribute for the text input. So here we will type in ref and this dot first input, like so. So now the first input here is tied to the first input variable here, that is a ref. And we will do the same for the two other inputs. And change the ref name, of course. Ref third input. Now we have tied all the inputs to the refs, but we still need to handle the focusing when we click the buttons. So we will add an on-click handler for each of these buttons. On click, so let's add it here. On click equals and even, and we can define an inline function here, and just here we will want to call the focus on the input. So I'll type in the code and I will then explain it. So here just this dot first input dot current dot focus. Okay, so now what happens here is when this button is clicked, it will call focus method on the first input, and as you can see we have here the current variable. So whenever we want to access the element of the ref, we need to do it via this current variable. So this is all that it takes to focus an element. So the ref and dot current dot focus, and we can do this same thing for the other two buttons. Just change the ref name and save it. Okay. And that should do it, but as we can see the app is not rendering anything. Okay, and refresh it and it's now. So now we should have the inputs focus when we click the buttons below them. So if we click the focus second, we can see that the second input is focused, or focus third, or focus first, like this. So this is the best way to create refs, and it was introduced in React 16.3. So if you are using 16.3 or newer version, you can handle your refs this way. Next up, we will also take a look how to focus element if you are using older version of React than 16.3. So let's create a new header here, React less than 16.3, and below we will create a component called refs 16.2 and render it below here. So I will type in it already 16.2 and import it, port refs 16.2 from refs 16.2, and then we create the actual component refs 62.js and import React, and create the actual excuse me, create the actual component here as refs 16.2 extends react.component, and inside of it let's add the render method, and just add 16.2 and test that it works. Okay, so we have something in the index.js that's not working. My bad. Let's add 16.2. Oh, my bad. Just add 16.2, and inside here we need to export the component. Now it should work. Yeah, sorry for that. And now let's add the actual HTML or JSX that we will return, and it is very much the same as with the 16.3 version. So I'm just gonna copy paste this render method so we don't have to type it again, and replace this component, and we will also copy paste this constructor like this, and the difference between these two is that on the 16.2 version we are going to use something called callback refs. So if we take a look at the documentation, here we have also callback refs. So instead of passing the ref attribute created by createRef, we are passing in a function. So how that works is that we are going to still define these first input, second input, third input variables in the constructor, but we say they are null. And in the ref attribute for the text inputs, instead of calling this.firstInput, we are creating a function, and that function gets an element as a parameter, and that element is this actual element, or the element for this text input. So we call it lm, and let's create arrow function, and inside this function we will assign this dot first input the element. So this dot first input equals element, like this. So what happens here is when this input is rendered, the function defined, or the function passed as the ref attribute, is called with parameter element, and that element is the DOM element of this text input. So we are gonna do the same thing for the two other inputs and change the variable name. And the third. And let's save it, and we can see that it renders correctly, but nothing happens yet. Let's refresh the page. Okay, we are not getting the inputs the inputs are focused, and that is because when we created the refs using the react.createRef, we needed to access it by using the current variable. But if we are using callback refs, this current variable is not needed, and we can just access the DOM element with straight from the variable. Because remember, when we assign the element for the variable first input, the element is itself the DOM element, so we can just call the focus straight for that. So let's take the current way for all three inputs and then save. And now see, if we press this focus first button, it should focus this text input, and it does, and second and third. Okay, so there is something wrong with the, okay, there is typo. Okay, now it's working like this. So now we have two ways to add refs, and with refs we can use refs to focus components or focus elements inside components. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please subscribe to my channel and like this video, and I will also leave a link for this code sandbox in the description, so you can fork it and play around with it. Okay, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.